Thank you, Dooner. Where's the cowbell, man? So Dooner got in trouble, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, Tim Dooner, got in trouble years ago when he first joined us and brought a cowbell to our first event, and I wasn't ready for that kind of energy, so, but certainly. So Ben, you are the Vice President of Global Transportation for Shaw Industries. Shaw Industries is a Warren Buffett-backed company, or owned company, I should say. It is the largest floor covering company in the world, is that right?
The largest carpet manufacturer in the world, correct.
Got it. So what we're standing on and what we often stand on, you guys are a major provider of that, and have a number of brands that that you also market the product that are not just under the Shaw brand.
Absolutely, absolutely. And to back up, the world's largest carpet manufacturer and also a leading provider of all surfaces.
So what we stand on, Shaw helps deliver.
There you go.
So let's talk a little bit about this concept of index-linked contracts. You have a very large transportation spend. You guys have your own fleet, and you've had it for years to provide the services. In terms of the scope of Shaw, tell us a little bit about the organization itself in terms of transportation.
Well, in transportation, and specifically in the contracts that we'll talk about today, you know, that middle mile, right? Because we do have a large fleet that is making a lot of the final mile deliveries. But overall, my spend on a yearly perspective is roughly $150 million from a truckload intermodal perspective. And that is something that we bid out each and every year through a traditional RFP today.
So $150 million purchase transportation spend. Yep. That's outside your fleet of a couple hundred trucks Correct. That you guys have your own drivers on. But that $150 million, you guys recently implemented something called IndexLinked Contracts, which is basically the idea that the rate is assessed against an index, against the floating index, and you're essentially buying transportation under some agreed discount or premium on that index.
That is correct. You know, if you look at the split across our network, it's typically an 80-20 contract spot. And when I think about the traditional RFP, you know, it works for us and it has, but I think there's room for improvement. Of course I do. And much to the pilot that you've talked about, obviously with Sonar and JB Hunt, we actually have started a pilot that's worked very well for us. There's a ton of transparency. Lets us know what the actual rates are. We actually check and move those on a monthly basis. So far, not high volume, but so far it has worked very, very well.
Where does it work? Where is the improvement on your purchase transportation?
Well, overall, you know, and I think the overall concept is hey, if you're purchasing at market price, you're always going to have the stable service that you need. And one of the reasons that I like to pilot it now is because traditionally, and the many years I've been doing this, here's how it works, and it still burns me, and I think there's such a great opportunity within the industry. You have your traditional RFP, then you have your percentage, I can say in our case, that may be awarded to a brokerage contract, right? And so we follow the market very close, but I can tell you, if you negotiate, you know, at X, and it falls off a cliff within the first quarter, nobody's coming back to say, hey, you know, my margins went from 15 to 25 or 30%, right? And so we battle that a little bit. So I think an advanced index would sort of help, you know, like I said, create that transparency and help it stay stable as it relates to the market.
I imagine it makes your job easier because you're not having to call them and say, hey, you know, you've been making 30% on these rates, and now it's time for me to get mine. You don't have to make those calls because the index moves, it floats with the rate. I also imagine when the market does the opposite, when rates go up, that they're not reluctant to call you. They're pretty quick. Pretty quick.
You know, sort of interesting. So our core partners, they're in that space. I mean, they're pretty quick now, and they know what we expect, and so they do come back to us. But still, even if it's a week or 2 weeks, to me, that's too long.
In terms of the control and power, ultimately when you're doing the RFP, I was having dinner last night with Rob Haddock from Coca-Cola, and one of the things that he pointed out, which it was actually, I'm afraid to admit this, but something I hadn't thought about, was the fact that budgets, in his case, and I wonder if this is the same for your case, is they may launch a new a soda line or a new product, or may have a situation where they have this massive surge in a region they didn't anticipate. So sort of out of budget, out of plan. And he says the finance team and the operational team that's benchmarking comes back and says, hey, wait a second, you broke your budget. And he's like, actually, I just responded to the demand and the orders I got, and you're just looking at the baseline budget without consideration of the additional expenses that I had to go or lanes that were not in the budget. And these unplanned issues really cost them. Does IndexLinked Contracts solve that for you? Is it easier to have the conversation because you're comparing against the market, or is that not a factor in your world?
Well, I think in anybody's world, you're always going to have that pop-up volume, that unexpected volume that comes throughout the year that you maybe didn't budget for, whatever. But the one thing the index does is it lets you know instantaneously, what you're going to be spending to move that volume. And it allows you to go back to the business and, hey, here's the expectation that we need to be prepared for due to this, volume that we, didn't project.
Now, in Cleveland, Ohio, I got to say that for locals because they think I'm talking about Cleveland, Tennessee. But when we were up at Cleveland, Ohio, this spring, or June, I guess it was June. It felt like spring up there in Cleveland that time of year. When we were up there, we had L'Oreal that had also implemented IndexLinked Contracts. And they were doing monthly assessments. They were basically looking at their freight spend after the end of the month. How are you guys doing that?
Yeah, we started off doing it bi-monthly, but now it's
every other month.
No,
Oh,
twice a
bi-monthly.
month. But yeah, so now it's moved to monthly, and that seems to be working for us. And I don't think we'll change from that. And even going forward, if we grow from where we're at today, and which I anticipate, I think that will be the cadence.
Are you doing it on your spot freight or your contract freight as well?
It's predominantly on the spot freight today.
Okay.
It's in some defined lanes, which we called contract brokerage, which spot, sort of the same, a mix there.
Contract brokerage because it goes to a freight broker, or contract brokerage because it's truly spot?
It's brokerage. It's contract.
So and JB Hunt is the provider in this?
Correct.
And JB Hunt takes it, and then they have the opportunity to define capacity that fits the demand. And in terms of service, because the price is a secondary element, right? Like the price pressure is out of the conversation. I remember Andrew Leto, I don't know if you know Andrew, but at Emerge had this conversation years ago and had said that there are 300,000 people, this was 2017, I believe, 2018, 300,000 people in freight that do nothing but actually price discovery. Like we're talking about freight brokers, all these brokerage floors are out doing nothing but price discovery. That seems like a big waste. And he was, his mission was to sort of disrupt that. But in your case, where you have an index that's actually moving with the market, you're essentially not having to negotiate rate because you don't, at the end of the day, have the market's going to be the market, whatever it assesses, and you're just paying whatever the index says that you should.
Well, I mean, in certain situations that works out. The one thing I think is important to mention here when it relates to an index is from a contract perspective or from a rate perspective, right? The shipper always wants to be at market and below, and where does the carrier want to be? They want to be at market and above. and so, my expectation, it is to be at market or below. Now, and to be aggressive in lanes that I may have, high volumes, very consistent, not super tough to service. I always want to be at market and below, and that's my team's objective.
And is JB Hunt aware that you want to be market below?
Yeah,
of course they are.
Yeah.
If they weren't before today, they are now, knowing that's true.
And it's worth mentioning, JB Hunt's been a long partner of Shaw Industries for a long time, so the pilot was just a natural fit to go along with them because, as I said, we've got years of partnership with them from all modes.
And then ultimately, JB Hunt's making a bet that they can buy below market, that through their buying power, through their network, through their technology and resources, they're essentially able to pass on some of those savings. Now, one of the things that has I've been in this business, you have as well, for many decades. One of the sort of projects that I worked on was this cost-plus arrangement years ago. And the problem was, no matter how much I could promise to a shipper, say it was Shaw, we never tried this with you guys, but no one trusted it because I was the one delivering, telling you what my costs were. All of a sudden, the incentives were gone for me to shop the cheapest capacity. In this situation, the carrier, JB Hunt in this case, has the ultimate incentive to maximize their margin because your costs are fixed, or at least fixed in terms of floating. they're below the market, they have to achieve that, and you have a third party providing you a rate.
Yeah, correct.
Have you had any challenges with it that has not worked out than you expected?
Not as of yet, and I think a lot of that's just goes with overall industry right now. It's not kind of hard to move things from point A to point B, but there will come a time, and as you talk about, obviously the J.B. Hunt or anyone else would certainly want to try to buy, less than market, but that's going to be tougher and tougher when things, turn around.
Yeah.
Craig, I think one of the things in index-based contracts that I would say is, especially for us at Shaw Industries, is we truly take a lot of pride in our carrier partnerships, our service provider partnerships, and I think this is a great opportunity for people to come in, because what is partnership built on? Transparency and trust. Come in with an index. Come in and let's talk and be open about where the market's at and what it takes to move freight. And someone said it earlier this morning. The whole winners and losers concept. I mean, we all, our expectation is we want to pay our providers a fair rate for great service, and that's what we say, and that's what we communicate all the time. And I think there's an opportunity, through this index-linked contract, to be able to come in and say, hey, what about this? Have you thought about this? This is what I want to present to you in a manner of transparency. How does this work for Shaw Industries?
I mean, one of the things that has always, we had this conversation earlier about Convoy, and one of the conversations that we had, our top tracks about, was the fact that freight is a commodity, and one of the things about the freight business is that your success, in Convoy's case, was they couldn't control the most important variable in their business, which is the rate. Is the market ultimately sets the rate. You and I don't have control. As much freight as you guys buy, you don't have control of the market rates. J.B. Hunt, as big as they are, don't have control of the market rates, and no one does in this market. How are you thinking about getting control of that, or are you saying at the end of the day, I don't need control of the rate, I just need to know that I'm getting a fair price?
Yeah, well, I think the market's going to be what the market is, but I do believe you can position yourself, to be favorable to that market by increasing your partnerships. Sort of how we operate today, and you'll hear me say it often, is Shaw Industries has, as it relates to transportation providers, we have a few partners in a lot of relationships. I know if I can increase my partnerships and that level of transparency, that I'm always going to be in line. Now, with that being said, I have to do the things right on my end as well. Mm-hmm. That will allow me to be there. I think where shippers get themselves in trouble is they don't create those partnerships, and it's not biting them as much now as it did a couple years ago. But it'll turn. It'll turn here soon.
How did you get the rest of your finance team and your accounts payable team and the transportation, the rest of the organization bought into this concept that was relatively new? How did they buy in?
Well, going back, it's still early, right? So we're not doing a whole lot of volume, and we're still having those conversations, and there's still conversations to be had before we move it forward in a larger scale.
Let's talk about bid season for a second, and the market conditions. It's a pretty challenging market for carriers. How are you guys approaching bid season this year, or into bid season next year?
I mean, from a Shaw perspective, obviously the market continues to be soft, and we're going to take advantage of that as much as we can. But with transparency, we're huge on incumbencies. We, from a bid perspective, we're just about finalized the 2024 bid, and it's certainly favorable to us this year. And so I don't think there's any magic there, other than just making sure that we continue to partner with the right people, the right businesses, to make sure that our business is covered regardless of the up or downturns.
You said it's more favorable. Are we talking a couple percent generally for your market, or better?
Yeah, I would say mid-single digit.
So 5-6% reductions. And do you think that's? You guys have 150 million. A big spend. Do you feel like that's are you hearing that from other shippers out there, is what they're expecting?
Correct.
So the carriers are going to be facing some, mid-single digit reductions in price. And you got discounts on this last bid season too, didn't you?
Correct.
So we're seeing an additional leg down. So
that's right.
Are we at a point where we've reversed the gains of the COVID economy, or are we still higher than where you were in 2019?
No, so we would be around flat.
From 2019.
2019.
It's 4 years of no growth. I think that says a lot about the challenges in our industry, and certainly not something that some of the providers want to hear, but they need to deal with the reality.
That's correct.
Well, Ben, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. Shaw Industries is a part of the Chattanooga metropolitan area, and we're certainly a big pride of Dalton, Georgia, and we're certainly honored to have you here. Thank you so much.